Copy. Paste. The black bars vanish. In the final week of December 2025, millions of Americans discovered they could simply highlight heavily redacted text from the Department of Justice's Epstein Files, paste it into a blank document, and read what the government had tried to hide. The technical failure lasted for hours before anyone noticed. By then, the damage was done. Or perhaps for the first time, transparency had accidentally won. This is the story of 3.5 million pages that were supposed to change everything. A story about what happens when 90% of Americans demand truth and receive redactions instead. When a law passes 427 to 1, when both parties agree for once. When survivors wait decades for justice only to find hundreds of pages entirely blacked out. But more than that, this is a story about the gap between what we were promised and what we received. And why that gap might tell us more than the files themselves ever could. November 18th, 2025. The United States House of Representatives votes on House Resolution 4405, the Epstein Files Transparency Act. 427 members vote yes, 1 votes no. Louisiana Republican Clay Higgins, the lone dissenter, offers no public explanation. The next day, the Senate passes it via unanimous consent. President Donald Trump signs it into law. The law is blunt. 30 days. That's what Attorney General Pamela Bondi has to release every unclassified document the Department of Justice possesses relating to Jeffrey Epstein. Flight logs, communications with government officials, details of his death, immunity deals, non-prosecution agreements. The law specifically prohibits withholding documents based on embarrassment, reputational harm, or political sensitivity. 90% of Americans, according to a September Marist poll, want these files released. 77% want all of them. This isn't partisan. 84% of Democrats, 67% of Republicans, 83% of independents. For a nation fractured on nearly everything, this consensus is extraordinary. Because Jeffrey Epstein wasn't just a convicted sex offender. He was a financier who moved among presidents, princes, scientists, and billionaires. He owned a private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands where witnesses testified underage girls were trafficked. He had a Manhattan mansion with surveillance cameras in every room. He kept flight logs, contact books, and according to survivors, leverage. When he died in his cell at the Metropolitan Correctional Center on August 10, 2019, the official ruling was suicide. Many didn't believe it. His death meant he would never face trial. His co-conspirators, with one exception, would never be charged. And the secrets he carried would remain sealed in FBI vaults and DOJ filing cabinets until November 19th, 2025, until the law gave the government 30 days, on December 19th, the deadline. At 5 p.m. Eastern, the Department of Justice launches the Epstein Library, a public website, a searchable database. America logs on. What they find is approximately 3,965 files, roughly 40,000 pages, a fraction of what the law demanded, and within those pages a pattern emerges, hundreds entirely blacked out. One sequence, 255 consecutive pages, completely redacted. Another, 119 pages of grand jury testimony, every word concealed. Representative Ro Khanna, the California Democrat who co-sponsored the act, tells NPR he's disappointed. Representative Thomas Massie, the Kentucky Republican who filed the discharge petition that forced the vote, is more direct. He suggests Attorney General Bondi could face obstruction of justice charges. Within hours, 16 files mysteriously disappear from the website. No explanation. They simply vanish. Then someone discovers the copy-paste flaw. The redaction software had been improperly applied. Anyone could bypass it. The information spreads across social media. People start recovering hidden text, including an unverified FBI tip from 2020 alleging President Trump witnessed the killing of an infant born to a 13-year-old trafficking victim. The department scrambles. Fox News reports that names of politically exposed individuals and government officials were redacted in direct violation of the law. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche disputes this, claims 1,200 names were redacted solely to protect victims. But the public doesn't trust it, because the photos that are released tell their own story. Former President Bill Clinton in a hot tub. The person next to him, face blacked out. A DOJ spokesperson later clarifies that redacted individual is a victim. Clinton at an event with Mick Jagger. Another redacted face. Clinton standing beside Epstein. No redactions there. That relationship had already been public. Clinton flew on Epstein's plane multiple times in the early 2000s. Photos of Epstein with Michael Jackson, with Walter Cronkite, the legendary CBS anchor, with countless unidentified women and girls, their faces carefully concealed. Lists of co-conspirators, 8 individuals identified as suspected accomplices to Epstein's crimes. Most names redacted. Ghislaine Maxwell visible. Jean-Luc Brunel visible. He's dead now. Suicide in a Paris jail cell in 2022 while under investigation for sex trafficking. But others remain alive, protected by black bars. The files include Epstein's contact book, his masseuse list, flight logs showing hundreds of trips aboard his private jets, nicknamed the Lolita Express by investigators. Evidence lists from his New York and Florida homes, blueprints of his Manhattan mansion, blueprints of Little St. James, his private island, visitor logs, employee lists, emails between Epstein and Michael Wolff, the journalist, discussing how to handle questions about Epstein's relationship with Trump, and surveillance footage. From the night Epstein died, the footage that was supposed to prove or disprove suicide. Heavily redacted, naturally. The backlash is immediate and bipartisan. Axios reports 700,000 files remain unreleased. The New York Times reports the DOJ is still reviewing up to 5.2 million files. Lawyers and counterintelligence specialists worked overtime through Christmas. 4,737 overtime hours between January and July 2025, costing taxpayers $851,000 just to apply redactions. By early January 2026, less than 1% of files are publicly available. Representative Massey releases a video. He states bluntly that there are at least 20 names of men accused of sex crimes in the possession of the FBI. He criticizes Bondi. He criticizes House Speaker Mike Johnson. He criticizes FBI Director Kash Patel. January 30th, 2026. The department releases the rest. Over 3 million pages, 180,000 images, 2,000 videos, the largest document dump in DOJ history. Deputy Attorney General Blanche holds a press conference, claims full compliance with the act, states that 3 million additional pages were withheld due to child sexual abuse material, active investigations, grand jury secrecy rules, and victim protection. Total production, 3.5 million pages. But the act had identified 6 million potentially responsive pages. Where are the missing 2.5 million? Representative Khanna doesn't buy it. He repeats his skepticism publicly. The department identified over 6 million potentially responsive pages. Only half were released. And then comes the final reveal. February 6th, 2026. Congress gets access to the unredacted files, but they can't take them home. They must view them in a secure reading room at the Department of Justice. No phones, no cameras, no copying. They can take handwritten notes. On February 9th, Massey and Khanna view the files together. They emerge and speak to reporters. Both use the same language. The Department of Justice is breaking the law. The next day, Khanna takes to the House floor. He reads 6 names, men who appear in the unredacted Epstein files, accused of crimes, whose identities were concealed from the public. The survivors, meanwhile, struggle to access information about their own cases. Maria Farmer, who filed one of the first complaints against Epstein in the 1990s, spends hours trying to navigate the Epstein library's malfunctioning search function. Anxiety runs high. These women waited over 20 years for this moment, and the system is still failing them. So what did we actually learn from 3.5 million pages? We learned Epstein had a network. Powerful men, governments, institutions. We saw the names we already knew: Clinton, Trump, Prince Andrew, Alan Dershowitz. We saw flight logs confirming what we suspected. We saw the contact book, the masseuse list, the blueprints of spaces designed for exploitation. But here's what we didn't get: the client list. Multiple officials, including Ghislaine Maxwell herself, in interviews conducted by Deputy Attorney General Blanche in a Tallahassee prison, stated no such list existed. But survivors insist otherwise. They describe Epstein bragging about leverage, about insurance, about powerful men who owed him. We didn't get the full grand jury transcripts. Those remain sealed by judicial order. A federal judge ruled in August 2025 that approximately 70 pages of grand jury records must stay hidden. Congress cannot override that, only another judicial order can. We didn't get unredacted names of co-conspirators, 8 individuals identified, most concealed. Why? The DOJ claims victim protection, but some of those redacted names are not victims, they're accomplices. And by law, their names should be public. We didn't get the full story of Epstein's death. Surveillance footage was released, reports were released, but questions remain. How did both guards fall asleep? How did cameras malfunction? Why was Epstein taken off suicide watch just days before his death? The files raise more questions than they answer, and we certainly didn't get transparency. What we got instead was a masterclass in bureaucratic obstruction, a law that passed 427-1, a 30-day deadline, and a government that spent the next 73 days releasing files in waves, each batch more redacted than the last. Faulty redaction software that allowed the public to briefly see what was hidden. Then, a scramble to correct the error. Files disappearing without explanation, a search function that didn't work, survivors unable to access their own records, and throughout it all, the department insisting it had complied fully. Representative Jamie Raskin, after viewing the unredacted files, accused the DOJ of obscuring information through unexplained redactions, not protecting victims, obscuring information. This is the twist. The files were never really the story. The story is what happened when the government was forced to reveal them. The story is how a bipartisan law with near-unanimous support was systematically undermined through legal loopholes, technical incompetence, and bureaucratic delay. The story is how even when 90% of Americans demand transparency, power protects itself. And the story is what this failure unleashed. Conspiracy theories, some old, some new. The ones about Epstein's death intensified. Was it really suicide? The ones about blackmail operations expanded. Was Epstein working for intelligence agencies? Were the files deliberately incomplete to protect compromised officials? False information spread. A redacted name in one document was identified by social media users as skateboarder Tony Hawk, who had supposedly married on Epstein's island. Hawk quickly debunked this, pointing out he'd been married 4 times, none on any island. AI-generated images circulated. Fake photos of politicians with Epstein went viral. The information ecosystem became polluted with noise, making it harder to distinguish truth from fabrication. And politically, the saga damaged everyone involved. Trump's approval ratings hit record lows. Marjorie Taylor Greene resigned from the House in January 2026 after Trump repeatedly attacked her for pushing too hard on the files. A December Economist poll found 55% of Americans disapproved of Trump's handling of the release. A January poll found that number rose to 56%. But here's what cannot be ignored. Over 250 underage girls were sexually exploited by Jeffrey Epstein. Their abuse happened in New York, Florida, the Virgin Islands, and locations across the globe. Some victims were as young as 14. Epstein pleaded guilty to state charges in Florida in 2008, receiving an absurdly lenient sentence of 13 months. He was allowed to leave jail for work 12 hours a day. His co-conspirators received federal immunity. That sweetheart deal, negotiated by then U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta, became a national scandal when it was exposed a decade later. Acosta resigned as Trump's labor secretary in 2019. The victims had been kept in the dark about the deal. Federal law required they be notified. They weren't. It took until 2019 for federal prosecutors in New York to indict Epstein on sex trafficking charges. He was arrested on July 6, 2019. 1 month and 4 days later, he was dead. Ghislaine Maxwell, his longtime associate and alleged recruiter, was convicted in December 2021. She is the only person ever charged in connection with Epstein's crimes. She is currently serving 20 years in federal prison. During her interviews with the DOJ in 2025, she claimed Epstein had a heart condition that prevented normal sexual intercourse. She maintained she never witnessed wrongdoing. She said she didn't believe Epstein killed himself. No one else has been charged. Not the pilots who flew underage girls on Epstein's planes. Not the assistants who scheduled appointments. Not the powerful men whose names appear in flight logs, contact books, and witness testimony. So, what does this case teach us? What permanent mark does it leave on the American psyche? First, transparency is performative when it's not enforceable. The Epstein Files Transparency Act had no penalty clause, no enforcement mechanism. When the DOJ missed the deadline, when files were over-redacted, when documents disappeared, there were no legal consequences. Representatives threatened impeachment. They suggested obstruction charges. But ultimately, the government decided what counted as compliance, and compliance became whatever they said it was. Second, the justice system is not designed to prosecute the powerful. Epstein's network included presidents, princes, scientists, and billionaires. His contact book read like a who's who of global influence, and yet, only one person was ever convicted. Not because others weren't complicit, but because prosecuting them would require challenging institutions designed to protect privilege. Third, victim protection can be weaponized. The law allowed redactions to shield victims' identities, a necessary protection. But it also allowed the government to hide the identities of perpetrators by claiming any redaction was for victim safety. Without independent oversight, we have no way to verify whether a redacted name is a victim or a co-conspirator. We must trust the same department that negotiated Epstein's original sweetheart deal. That trust has been shattered. Fourth, information warfare is the battlefield of modern democracy. The files themselves mattered less than the narrative around them. The technical failure that exposed unredacted content. The AI-generated fakes that spread on social media. The conspiracy theories that filled the vacuum left by missing information. In an age of digital manipulation, truth doesn't just need to be revealed, it needs to be protected. And we are failing at that. Jeffrey Epstein built an empire on secrecy. He cultivated relationships with powerful people not through merit, but through leverage. He surrounded himself with individuals who had reputations to protect, and he made sure they knew he had documentation. Surveillance cameras, flight logs, photos, emails. The entire operation was designed to ensure silence. His death should have been the end, but instead, it became a beginning. A reckoning with how complicit institutions became in his crimes, how the justice system protected him, how the media gave him credibility, how the powerful looked away until they couldn't anymore. The Epstein Files were supposed to provide answers. Who knew what? Who did what? Who enabled this system of abuse to flourish for decades? Instead, they provided a mirror, a reflection of a government that promises transparency while practicing opacity, a system that claims to serve justice while protecting power, a democracy that allows 90% of its citizens to demand truth and receives redactions instead. The files revealed photos, emails, flight logs, witness statements, but they concealed names, relationships, and accountability. And in that gap between revelation and concealment, between law and enforcement, between promise and delivery, we see the architecture of American power, built not on what it shows us, but on what it can hide. History remembers the crimes, but we analyze the truth. And the truth is this: the Epstein Files were never going to deliver justice. They were always going to be a test of whether our institutions prioritize transparency or self-preservation, whether our government serves the people or protects the powerful, whether a law passed by 427 votes can overcome a system designed to resist accountability. We have the answer now. 3.5 million pages released, 2.5 million withheld, hundreds of pages entirely blacked out, names redacted, files disappeared, deadlines missed, promises broken. Jeffrey Epstein is dead. Ghislaine Maxwell is in prison. And the rest? They remain in the shadows, protected by black bars, shielded by bureaucracy, enabled by a system that talks about justice, but delivers impunity. If you want to understand how power works in America, subscribe to Crimes of the Century. Because these stories don't just demand to be told. They demand we remember that transparency is not a gift from the government. It is a right we must fight for, and the fight is never over.